In this conference of embracing our inner freedom, I'd like to share with you some reflection about what do we begin to experience as God dismantles our falsity, as we let go more and more, as we consent and surrender and consent again. And really what happens is that the attitudes we find ourselves taking on are really the assimilation of all the values of the gospel. And we know those attitudes as the Beatitudes. They're attitudes of being, and they're not attitudes that you can just make yourself have. They come from the inner and move out. And so the human condition, as it's opened and opened more to the presence of Christ within us, to the presence of God's Spirit, we begin to live the attitudes of the gospel, these basic values. But even as that is going on, God continues to purify us. And so there's more purification, even after we've let go of a lot of the external referencing in our life. We're no longer looking for security symbols, at least as much, maybe occasionally, or symbols that speak of our being esteemed, or symbols of trying to control or have power. We pretty well let go of that. There's still some more purification, because what needs to be purified now is our intellect, our will, and our memory. And what John of the Cross calls this part of the journey, calls it the night of the Spirit. So the night of sense is the senses, the external references. The night of the Spirit is we're really being called to let go of any disordered image of God or image of ourself. And when we talk about letting go of our image of God and our image of ourself, the last little traces of it that are tinged with illusions, we grow in humility. We grow in truth, because humility is accepting reality as it is. So it's like we're getting in touch with what has always been. But it is confusing for us, and we grow. One of the graces is that we find within us a deeper longing for God. As we surrender in faith, it's like our desire to know who God is, to live in God's Spirit, becomes even greater. Thomas Merton wrote a prayer that describes this part of the journey, and you probably heard it before. It's from his book, Thoughts in Solitude. But he says very simply, and I think it's all of our prayer, "My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really understand myself." It's almost as the more we get purified, or our false self is dismantled, the more we come into mystery, the less eager we are to say, this is the way it is, and this is who I am. Nor do I really understand myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have the desire in all that I'm doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may not know anything about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my troubles alone. Doesn't that sound familiar? Our own journey as we go into the cloud of the unknowing, as we move into mystery. The simple answers that we always, or the pat answers that we had before, don't make any sense anymore. And so let's look at our image of God first of all. And that image of God, the This is actually a picture that's taken from the Sistine Chapel. And as we grow in the spiritual journey, our image of God matures. And the God of our childhood changes. If we had a good experience and we knew God as loving as a child, that even changes, not in the sense of loving, but who God is. But for many of us, when we were children, God was the aged white male. And that's the image we had in our mind. And God was up on the heavens, on the throne, watching over us, going to punish us if we didn't do what was right. All of the prejudices that go along with that. And so we begin to let go of that, because as we come into an awareness of who God is, it just doesn't quite make sense anymore. One of our sisters, Sister Benedicta, worked in Norfolk. She taught at Norfolk University. And she had a wonderful gift to work with the African Americans. And she taught speech and drama and composition. And she told me many years ago, she said one day, when the students came to class, all the students were black, African American, and she said she had a chair in the front of the room, and she had a picture of a photo of a black Jesus with very dark skin. But she had it facing towards the back of the chair, towards the chair itself, so that the students couldn't see it. Now she said, I want you to write a spontaneous essay when you see this picture of Jesus. What comes to mind? Just let it flow. And then she slowly turned the painting around, or the photo around. And here was Jesus portrayed as a black man. She said the students were so shocked that they couldn't even lift up their pen. Our image of God is very much determined by our experience and by what others tell us. And as we grow in the journey, we begin to hold lightly to that and let it go. And then we have the image of which I always call the God of the superego, the God who is the judge, or the God of our parents sometimes, who put fear in us, or the God of the policeman. All of those kinds of images no longer fit. And then the other God that we have as adults is the God of gaps. Did you ever hear of the God of gaps? The God of gaps is when we turn to God as the court of last appeal. It's like, I need God now because I'm in trauma, or I'm having a struggle, or somebody's ill. Or if we can't decide something, who's the ultimate judge? That's the God of the gaps. We really have no ongoing relationship with God. We just call on God when we have a need. All of that, we move beyond that as we grow in our image of God. As I said earlier, God becomes transcendent, eminent, and yet eminent, closer to us than we are to ourselves, living within us, utterly beyond our imaging, our language, utterly beyond anything we can even begin to articulate. Anthony DeMello always used to say that when we use a word to describe God, we're just simply pointing in that direction, but that's not who God is. It's much too limited. And then another growth that happens is our image of ourself. And all of us have basic self-concepts that we kind of grow up with because of our life experience. And they're kind of universal concepts. That's what the archetype is. And we need to begin to dismantle those. There's three basic ones that we usually identify. And the first one is the orphan.